Hey guys, Bump here, bringing you this 9.2 FrostDK Advanced Rotation Guide. Today we'll cover all the information you need to excel as a Frost Death Knight in the 9.2 patch. I will gloss over like the fundamentals, so if you do want to, if this is the first time you play a FrostDK, I recommend you to having a look at my FrostDK Beginner Rotation Guide. That gives you a bit more fundamental understanding, and then you can use this guide to kind of build on top of that and become even better. We will cover everything essential here that is associated with the rotation. That means looking at the core rotation, procs, the resources we use, all our cooldowns, and then also briefly discussing the Mythic Plus rotation. Jumping straight into it, we have the core Frost Death Knight rotation, and this consists of 3 spells. You have Obliterate, Frost Strike, and Howling Blast. And it's quite easy to use them. Use Obliterate to spend your runes, which regenerates runic power. You spend that runic power on Frost Strike, and you use any procs of Rime on Howling Blast. And then you kind of, you cycle through the spells, and it kind of flows from there. I think the crucial aspect of playing this correctly is managing your resources properly. So we have both runes and runic power we need to pay attention to. However, in 9.2, the Frost Death Knight rotation has too many resources generally. This means that we generate more resources than we can actually spend. So there's a priority here to what we should be spending. And that priority is spending runes. Runes are converted into more damage and generally will bring you overall better DPS. This means that the highest priority when it comes to resources is making sure we don't have more than 3 runes ready. We do that because we can regenerate a maximum of 3 runes at a time. So if we have 4 runes ready, it means we have 2 recharging, which means that we are losing out on that recharge time. This means that you will overcap on runic power, and that's completely fine. Don't worry too much about it. Just prioritize making sure you always generate 3 runes, okay? We have 2 procs in the Frost Death Knight rotation. We have Rime and we have Kill Machine. Rime procs off your Obliterate, makes it so that your Howling Blast becomes free of cost and deals a ton more damage. This is quite high priority to press. Generally, whenever you generate the Rime proc, you want to spend it before you hit Obliterate again. Since Obliterate is what generates the Rime procs, the only thing you need to care about is making sure you hit Rime before Obliterate. This isn't strictly the case, but generally you can take it as a general rule, always spend your Rime procs. Like if you're sitting on full runes, it might be worthwhile to spend at least 2 of those runes before you hit the Rime, but you will lose out on procs overall, right? So it's a bit of a grey area how much you should prioritize them, but generally just hit Howling Blast whenever you get Rime. We also have Killing Machine. Killing Machine procs off your crit auto attacks. It scales linearly with your auto attack speed and your crit chance, so the more haste you get, and if you spec into like Icy Talons, or if you have the Wind Fury totem, that will all increase your Killing Machine proc rate because you get more autos, which means more crit autos. It makes it so that your Obliterate deals frost damage and has a guaranteed crit. And this is like a huge upgrade. Dealing frost damage means that you do not get your damage reduced by armor, and you also scale with mastery, and also scale with like Razor Eyes debuff, stuff like that. So it's a huge upgrade to your Obliterate, and we want to consume them ASAP. As soon as you get a Killing Machine proc, try and spend it on Obliterate. If you don't, you risk overwriting it with another proc, and we don't want to do that, right? We also have a dot called Frost Fever. This is something you really don't need to pay much attention to. It is applied through our Howling Blasts, which are applied through whenever you get a Rime proc, and generally we have more than sufficient procs of Rime to be able to apply the Frost Fever. It's technically okay to cast naked Howling Blasts, as in without having a Rime, just apply the Frost Fever, but you can just simply ignore that and only apply it using the Rime procs, and that's going to be completely fine for you. When we consider the Frost Death Knight core rotation AoE, nothing changes, which is quite nice. You can pick up Talons that will change your rotation, like Glacial Advance and Frost Scythe, but currently they are not used heavily, right? We rarely ever see them used, which means that you can simply ignore them and just play the single target rotation to deal AoE damage. We deal AoE damage through the Rune procs we get to Howling Blast, and then also through our cooldowns. And that is quite a significant damage throughput, so no need to spec into those specific talents. Now, let's consider cooldowns, and this is kind of the big chunk of this video. We're going to talk about all the cooldowns and discuss exactly how to use them. And we'll start off with Remorseless Winter. This is a 20-second cooldown spell, which, when pressed, deals damage around you and slows targets around you. The thing is, that might seem like an AoE spell, but we pick up Gathering Storm, and we have conduits like Everfrost, which buffs the damage of this spell significantly, making it a big upgrade to press even in a single target. And it is crucial that you actually use this spell properly to maximize your DPS. Gathering Storm makes it so that every time you use runes when your Remorseless Winter is active, it increases the duration and the damage. If you spend enough runes, you can extend the duration for such long that you can then press Remorseless Winter again. And this is an insane upgrade to do whenever you can leverage that. The thing is that Gathering Storm stacks up to 10 times, which increases the Remorseless Winter damage. And if you then can press Remorseless Winter again, when it is at 10 stacks, you get a full new duration at 10 stacks, right? So this means that you don't need to do the ramping bit again, and it's a big upgrade. This also means that it's worthwhile it is a good idea to press Remorseless Winter when we have a couple of runes ready. You actually don't want to sit around and, save runes explicitly for this. Instead, you can do it passively by spending runic power before you press Remorseless Winter. So you're sitting there, maybe have 3 runes, you have 60 runic power, and Remorseless Winter's coming off, you spend that runic power. And this passively will help you both generate some runes through the rune recharge system, and we have our proc runic empowerment, which has a chance to generate runes whenever we spend runic power. Essentially, just ensure you spend runic power before Remorseless Winter, and that will make sure that you passively pull for it without losing too many resources. That's how we play it. Another point is that Remorseless Winter is a 20-second cooldown, and our cooldown windows are generally around 1 minute. This means that you need to press Remorseless Winter on cooldown all the time. Like, if you don't do that, you're going to start desyncing it with other cooldowns. Perfect case, you press it every 20 seconds, and every 1 minute it aligns perfectly. That is the goal. Do that and aim for doing that. Yeah. Now, let's talk about Pillar of Frost. This is kind of like our main buff cooldown. It's a 1 minute CD default. Can be reduced by ice cap, but we don't really play ice cap, so let's ignore that. Any runes you spend in your Pillar of Frost increases the strength gain it gives you. This means that we want to use any hard-hitting abilities towards the end of Pillar of Frost, and I'm going to get back to that later. When it comes to usage, you just press this as soon as this comes up, and as I said, make sure that your every third Remorseless Winter comes just before your every Pillar of Frost, so it aligns very nicely. Pillar of Frost changes dramatically if we pick up the Obliteration talent. So Obliteration makes it so that during Pillar of Frost, whenever you press Frost Strike or Howling Blast, it generates a proc of Killing Machine. And the whole goal of picking up this talent is to generate as many of those Killing Machine procs as possible. To do this, we leverage something that we call weaving. This essentially means that every other GCD we generate a proc of Killing Machine using Frost Strike or Howling Blast, and every other GCD we spend that with Obliterate. This means that in your Pillar of Frost window with Obliteration, you're going to press Frost Strike or Howling Blast, Obliterate, Frost Strike or Howling Blast, Obliterate, Frost Strike or Howling Blast, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, right? That's the weaving rotation. Now, it's so advantageous to generate these procs of Killing Machine that you do not want to hit any other spell within this Pillar of Frost Obliteration window. And I really want to emphasize this. Nothing else can be pressed, okay? This means that anything that you want to time with your Pillar of Frost window needs to be pressed beforehand. So Remorseless Winter, press that, the GCD before Pillar of Frost with Obliteration, so you don't, either have to wait until the end or accidentally press it in the middle, right? Before before is the point to press Remorseless Winter. And I'm going to get back to these other spells we need to use before Remorseless Winter, before Pillar of Frost with Obliteration. Now, we want to ensure that within our Pillar of Frost window here, we can press a button every GCD. This means that we need to pool some resources beforehand. This generally isn't much of an issue because we have lots of resources in the rotation, but you will face instances of yourself not having enough resources to fully leverage the Pillar of Frost window. So you need to pool some. Generally, it is sufficient to have 2 runes ready and 30 runic power before you hit Pillar of Frost. And this just means that, if you very low on resources, don't just go into your Pillar of Frost window, wait a couple of seconds until you feel like you have sufficient resources to fully leverage it. Yeah. Another note is that the GCDs truly matter here, which means that we want to generate a killing machine as soon as possible as we enter the Pillar of Frost window. This essentially means that we hit Pillar of Frost and then immediately hit Frost Strike or Howling Blast. You can do this with separate buttons, but you can also use these 2 macros here. Either we go into the Obliteration window using a Howling Blast with a Rime proc. We use this macro. Or we don't have a Rime proc, so we use the Frost Strike instead and we use the other macro. So essentially you have 2 buttons to use your Pillar of Frost, and you use one of them depending on the situation. One final note, I feel like I'm going on there for a long time, but it's important to cover every single tidbit, yeah? If you get a Killing Machine proc before your Pillar of Frost window, spend it beforehand. You might be tempted to press Pillar of Frost and then, get a nice strength boot for that Killing Machine. However, in the end, you lose out on a GCD you could have used to spend the Killing Machine proc, and that's more value. So if you're getting ready to enter your Pillar of Frost window, you get a Killing Machine proc, spend that before you move into the Pillar of Frost window. Finally, if you do get a natural Killing Machine proc, so Killing Machine proc from your crit auto attacks, just spend that as your priority. So let's say you just you generate a Killing Machine proc, you spend that, and then you generate one from auto attack. That will mean pressing Obliterate again. So that kind of disrupts the weaving rotation. But you need to be quite quick to react because you have only a 1 GCD window to kind of react to the proc. So usually you're going to accidentally overwrite them, and that's kind of fine. But if you're very good with your actions, spend those natural Killing Machine procs as your priority. Yep. Alright, that was everything about Obliteration. Now let's talk about Breath of Sindragosa. And this is kind of like the other talent to pick that isn't Obliteration. There's either run Obliteration or Breath of Sindragosa. Now Breath of Sindragosa, when you activate it, continuously drains your runic power every second. And the whole goal with this talent is to keep it off for as long as possible. So we need to optimize the amount of resources we generate during its duration and ensure that we do not drop it due to any mistakes we make. Before we activate Breath of Sindragosa, we need to pool a sufficient amount of resources. This generally means just having more than 60 runic power, and then, nothing else there. So you just don't hit Breath of Sindragosa if you have like 20 runic power, because it's going to end straight away. But if you have more than 60, you can have like 1 or 2 runes, you're going to be fine, no problem at all. You always time Breath of Sindragosa with your Pillar of Frost window. Breath of Sindragosa is 2 minutes, Pillar of Frost is 1 minute, so they align perfectly, and you can macro Pillar of Frost with into the Breath of Sindragosa macro you use. Once you activate Breath of Sindragosa, you do not want to press a button that spends runic power ever. This means that you are forbidden for pressing Frost Strike. You cannot press Glacial Advance if you spec into that. You cannot press Death Strike. And that's quite obvious. If you do that, you lose a ton of Breath of Sindragosa duration. You would generally press Obliterate. That is your main runic power generator. And that's essentially what you will be spamming in your Breath of Sindragosa window. However, there's other buttons you also will press, like Remorseless Winter and Cold Art if you talent into that, stuff like that. Yeah. Now, you don't want to simply press Breath of Sindragosa and then just start spamming Obliterate. What will generally happen is that you will overcap on runic power. If you press Obliterate every single GCD, if you have lots of runes, that will simply generate too much and you're going to cap. You don't want to do that. Look at every tick the Breath of Sindragosa ticks down and make sure you only spend Obliterates when you are at roughly 75 rune power. I think the technical value is 70. So you're allowed to press Obliterate whenever you are below 70 rune power. Because if you press Obliterate, you can get 20 rune power from that, and then you can get 5 from Rune Continuation, and then 5 from Frost Fever, and that prevents you from overcapping. But it's not like a strict rule. You can use Obliterate at 8 as well without having too many issues. Furthermore, if you have lots of runes, you need to press Obliterate even though you would overcap. So if you're sitting at 6 runes, you don't want to wait until your Breath of Sindragosa ticks down to 70 before you press Obliterate. Just press Obliterate until you go to 4 below. Yep. Or 3 below technically. Now, when you start dropping in runic power, your priority changes slightly. So when you're at high runic power, like 60, 50, that area and above, it is completely fine to spend your Rime procs, right? It won't endanger your breath that you spent on Rime proc that either only generates 8 runic power if you're running Rage of the Frozen Champion, or generate none if you're not running that legendary. However, when we start dropping in lower, so when we start going below 50, 40 runic power, 30, you don't want to spend any GCD on anything that isn't Obliterate if you could spend it on Obliterate, right? You are in the danger zone if you spend, if you use a Rime proc that might end your Breath of Sindragosa early. So generally, when you're below 50, 40 runic power, prioritize using Obliterates and don't spend your Rime procs if you could use Obliterates anyway. Finally, when you're starting to get really low, so you're all out of runes, you're down, below 30 runic power, your breath is just about to end, that's when you're just going to spam the Obliterate button. Every time breath ticks, it has a probability to generate a rune for you through our runic empowerment. So ideally, what you want to do is as soon as you get that rune generated, you want to use it to keep breath alive. So when you're very low in runic power, just sit there and spam the Obliterate button, and it's going to help you catch those runes as soon as they become available. Right. Yeah, I think that's everything we would Breath of Sindragosa. You want to essentially use this on cooldown in a fight, but if there's a specific cleave opportunity, you can hold on to it for a little while to get more cleave damage, because it deals a ton of cleave damage. Yeah? Furthermore, you can leverage anti-magic shell to extend your Breath of Sindragosa. This means that you can soak magic damage spells to generate runic power, which will help you extend the Breath of Sindragosa. Great. Let's talk about our next skill, Empower Rune Weapon, because that interacts heavily with both Obliteration and Breath of Sindragosa. So Empower Rune Weapon gives you a rune every couple of seconds and some runic power, and it lasts for 20 seconds. And this is a big kind of resource injection into rotation. It also increases your haste significantly, which also increases the amount of resources you can generate per unit of time. When you're running Breath of Sindragosa, you want to hold on to Empower Rune Weapon until it is necessary to press it. This means you don't want to use Empower Rune Weapon with Breath of Sindragosa. What will happen is that you're going to have loads of resources at the start, too many resources, that's going to make you overcap, and then once Empower Rune Weapon finishes, you're going to have too little resources and your breath is going to finish early. Instead, you hold on to Empower Rune Weapon for up to 15 seconds until you're at a point where you are lacking resources to keep up your breath. So start a breath, you're generally fine, no problem at all keeping it up, but after 10-15 seconds, depending on your luck, depending if you have Bloodlust or not, you're going to notice that your rune power is ticking down and you don't have the runes to kind of generate the rune power you need to keep it up. At that point is when you press Empower Rune Weapon. That's how it works. You need to make the judgment yourself. I can't tell you always use it 15 seconds. It will depend on your procs. You kind of just need a vibe for it. Try it out a couple times. Get a feel for, okay, this is how it feels like when I'm low on resources and I should press Empower Rune Weapon. Just play around with it and learn those timings yourself. For Obliteration, Empower Rune Weapon is really quite nice. We use it, time it for every second Obliteration window. The cooldown of Empower Rune Weapon is slower than 2 minutes, but you want to hold on to it. The fact is that we use Accelerated Cold, which makes it so Empower Rune Weapon gives a ton of haste. And used in conjunction with Obliteration, it means that we get extra GCDs in that Pillar of Frost window, which allows us to generate more Killing Machine procs, which is a big DPS upgrade. Now, Empower Rune Weapon lasts for 20 seconds, whereas your Pillar Frost window is only 12 seconds. This means that we want to use Empower Rune Weapon up to 8 seconds beforehand. This allows you to naturally pull some resources easily and just makes your Obliteration window, makes you enter the Obliteration window without having any problem at all with keeping up for the entire duration. Yeah, so Empower Rune Weapon 8 seconds before Pillar Frost when running Obliteration. Simple as that. Right, we also have Frostwyrm's Fury. This summons this huge dragon that travels 40 yards in front of you and deals a absolute ton of damage. It's AoE, so always want to save this for ads whenever there are ads in a boss fight. Like, it's not worthwhile to use it at start and buff it with your spells when you could use it at 3 targets late in the fight and you have 3 times the damage, right? So always make sure to save that for ads. Ideally, you want to use it at your Pillar Frost window. As I mentioned earlier, your strength gain from Pillar Frost increases throughout this duration, which means it's going to be highest at the end, and we want to use our hard-hitting abilities at this high Pillar Frost strength level. When running Breath of Sindragosa, this naturally means that you hit the Breath of Sindragosa and Pillar Frost, and then 12 seconds later, you're going to hit your Frostwyrm's Fury. Obviously, you save Frostwyrm for ads if that's necessary, but in single target situation, that would be what you would do. For Obliteration, it's actually not worthwhile to press Frostwyrm's Fury within your Pillar Frost window. There's like an opportunity cost when pressing another GCD in your Pillar Frost, because that means you're not generating or spending a Killing Machine proc. So if you're running Obliteration on pure single target, you use Frostwyrm's Fury after your Pillar Frost window. That's how it works. Still, if there are ads you want to use it on, it's worthwhile to press it in the Pillar Frost window. So it depends on the situation, really. We also have Cold Heart. This is a talent we generally pick up with Breath of Sindragosa. It stacks up to 20 times, and when you use it, it deals damage proportional to the number of stacks. There are essentially 2 playstyles to use this. Playstyle 1 is using it at the end of Pillar Frost window at 20 stacks with a max strength gain, and then outside of Pillar Frost at 10 stacks. This means that it perfectly lines up, so it goes 20 stacks in Pillar Frost, 10 stacks outside, 20 stacks Pillar Frost, 10 stacks outside, so on and so on. That's a viable playstyle. You can also just use it dynamically at 16 plus stacks whenever you get a Fallen Crusader proc. So you can just sit on it as soon as it's above 16. If you have a Fallen Crusader proc, you press it. If you don't get Fallen Crusader, tough luck, just press it at 20. Both these playstyles are fine. I think the 20-10-20 is probably easiest to play because it's more rigid and you can follow the rule at all times and don't need to react dynamically to your buff and procs. We also have Raise Dead. This is kind of like a forgotten cooldown. Simply macro this into your Pillar Frost and forget about it. It just summons this dude that hits your target for a while. If you want to be real min-maxy, you can explode this ghoul at the end of its duration using Sacrificial Pact, but it's really not a significant upgrade and you can simply just ignore it. Doesn't matter if you do it. Great, that was all the core talents. Let's now talk about the Covenant spells, because some of them have a significant impact on how our cooldowns are used and rotations change. Let's start out with Night Fae and Death's Due. And this has a paramount impact on our single target and AoE rotations. Essentially, this replaces our Death Decay, which we generally don't use as a Frost Death Knight. It's kind of okay to use an AoE, but you don't need to care about it. It makes it worthwhile to press on single target, and it makes it worthwhile to time properly with our cooldowns. So Death's Due has a second cooldown, and this naturally aligns with our Pillar Frost windows. This means that you want to hit Death's Due as soon as it comes up, so that every second Death's Due comes before your Pillar of Frost window. Yeah? This will help, this will boost. You get strength gain from Death's Due, you get strength gain from Pillar of Frost, and they boost each other, which is a big DPS increase. Also, if you run legendaries like Pheromones, it gives lots of haste, which is great, so that's how we use it. Specifically for Obliteration, you want to use Death's Due properly. It has to come before the Obliteration window. If you're running Death's Due, that's going to give you a bunch of haste in the Obliteration window, it gives an extra GCD, stuff like that. So just pay attention to it, use it on cooldown, make sure you don't misalign it. Yeah, you can use it a couple seconds before Pillar of Frost, because the debuff you get from Death's Due lasts for 12 seconds by default, 14 if you have the Night Fae legendary. This means that you have like 10 seconds on the actual ground effect, and then you have an extra 12 or 14. So the effective buff duration is 24 seconds, right? This means you can use it up to, 12 seconds before you Pillar Frost and still get full overlap. You just want to make sure you don't use it in such a way that you don't get full overlap of the buff for your Pillar Frost window. Ideally though, it's all going to align well. You're going to use it on cooldown, no problemo. Yeah. There's one instance with Death's Due that changes that one important rule, that don't use any other GCDs in your Pillar Frost window with Obliteration, and it's in AoE scenarios. So Death's Due makes your Obliterates cleave, and what we want to do is make sure we make as many of our Killing Machine buffed Obliterates cleave as possible. This means that you actually use Death's Due, the second GCD in your Pillar Frost window. So you use your Pillar Frost macro with Frost Strike or Howling Blast, that generates a Killing Machine proc. You then hit Death's Due, and then you follow the weave rotation, Obliterate and Frost Strike, Howling Blast, and Obliterate, and so on and so on. This then maximizes the number of cleaves you get, because Death's Due is only 10 seconds, right? Pillar Frost is 12, so if you use it beforehand, you lose out on some overlap. Right, we have Abomination Limb. This is probably one of the easiest Covenant abilities to use. You press it on cooldown. You ideally want to use this in conjunction with your Pillar Frost window, because the Abomination Limb is buffed by the strength gain. And you also time it with your Breath of Sindragosa window. Like if you're running Marolef with the Kevin's Oozling, that buffs your breath window quite significantly. So always make sure you align it with Pillar Frost, and then align it with Breath of Sindragosa if you're running that talent. Furthermore, we need to pay attention to the Fleshcraft ability. It's that channeling spell that gives us a big shield. That is also a DPS throughput upgrade if we're using the Marolef Soulbound or the MNI Soulbound. For Marolef, we simply want to tap it on cooldown just so we gain the buff. That will then give us the mastery buff from essentially feeding off ourselves. That's how it works. For MNI, we want to fully channel Fleshcraft every 2 minutes. It will stack up a buff on ourselves that whenever we heal the damage, it kind of explodes on the enemies around us, and it gives a ton of damage. So for MNI, we need to do that full channel every 2 minutes. Ideally, do it before your Pillar Frost window so that you can buff the explosions with the strength from the Pillar Frost. For Kyrian, Shackle, very easy to use. Just use it right before every Pillar Frost window, and don't forget about it. Easy peasy. Swarming Mist. This is a bit special because it generates a ton of Rune power in AoE scenarios. On single target, it's a little bit, but in AoE, it's a ton. This means that it synergizes very well with your Breath of Sindragosa window because it helps keep up the duration. What you want to do is that normally you just hit Swarming Mist on cooldown, hit it before every Pillar Frost window. That's it, done with it, right? However, with Breath of Sindragosa on single target, you want to hold on to it for a while because it does generate quite a lot of Rune power for the Rune cost. So you use it after you press Breath of Sindragosa to help with that Rune power generation. And in AoE, you hold on to it until you start starving your breath window, because it will instantly bring you to 100 Rune power when you press it. It generates just a ton of Rune power, so it's like a lifesaver. In AoE, it will extend your breath window significantly, and make sure you leverage it properly to do so. Alright, that was all the Covenant spells. Now let's take a look at some openers. So we have two different openers depending on whether or not you pick up Obliteration or Breath of Sindragosa. So for Obliteration, we have this opener right here. We start out with Remorseless Winter, follow up with our Covenant ability, and then we press our Pillar Frost macro. So generally, this means using the one with the Howling Blast, because we don't have the resources necessary to actually press a Frost Strike. So we use a naked Howling Blast in this case, and that's completely fine. Empower Rune Weapon, you can use that on pool if you want to, or you can use it with the Pillar Frost macro. It doesn't really matter that much, right? If you get a Killing Machine, like the first auto attack you hit on the boss, right? So you get the Killing Machine before you go into your Pillar Frost window. Spend that Killing Machine and then go with the Pillar Frost macro. Yeah? Just as talked about before, if you get Killing Machine procs, spend them before moving into Obliteration window. And then you go into your weaving rotation. So on, so on, so on. Yeah? For Breath of Sindragosa, in the same manner, start out with Remorseless Winter, and then follow up with 2 Obliterate. obliterates. This is to generate that Rune power that we want to pull up for your Breath of Sindragosa window. Once we've done the obliterates, we obviously spend any rhymes we get. If we do get a rhyme from those obliterates, we then follow up with the Covenant ability and then press our Breath of Sindragosa macro and then move on to the Breath of Sindragosa rotation. Great. Now, for Mythic Plus, essentially nothing changes, which is nice to some degrees and, you know, boring to some, I don't know. We don't pick up the talents necessary to actually change our rotation, and we essentially just play it as we would play a single target. Like every ability we press, most of them works in AoE as well, and we don't specifically cater towards increasing the AoE damage, because that's the same thing as increasing single target damage, which we're doing anyway. So, having said that, there is one piece of optimization we can do in these kind of AoE scenarios. So, before you get the new 4 set, we're going to run Razorize on one of our weapons. And essentially, in any AoE scenario, we want to tab through our enemies to apply Razorize to all of them. So Razorize quickly stacks up to our main target. Once it goes to 5, swap to another one, stack it up. Once that's 5, go to another one, and so on. That's kind of min-maxy, but it's still a way to optimize our AoE damage before we get 4 set. After we get 4 set, our Razorize is going to be applied naturally through the Gathering Storms that the 4 set fires. Also, a quick mention about 2 buffs that become relevant with specific builds, generally Obliteration. We have Unleashed Frenzy, a conduit, and Icy Talons, a talent that we run. Both of these require specific attention because they have a very short buff duration, 6 seconds, and we need to actively keep them up. Generally in the rotation, what we will do is make sure you press Frost Strike before these buffs go away. This means that in specific scenarios, you will prioritize pressing Frost Strike instead of, for instance, a Howling Blast with a Rhyme or an Obliterate. Outside of your cooldowns, that's kind of fine, because it just means that you swap around the order of your spells a little bit. For Obliteration windows, what we will do is that we will prioritize pressing Frost Strike instead of Rhyme if we're going to drop Unleashed Frenzy. Icy Talons we don't need to care too much about, because actually the 4 set naturally keeps it up. Like the Glacial Advances, the 4 set triggers, they actually count for spending Rune power for Icy Talons. So don't need to care about that in your Obliteration window, but for Unleashed Frenzy, you need to ensure that every second Killing Machine generator is a Frost Strike. Alright, that was everything I had for you guys today. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you learned something about the Frost DK rotation. Leave a comment down below. Tell me what you thought about it. Upvote, downvote. Do consider subscribing. You can always hook me up on the Actors Discord if you have any questions. And I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you very much for watching. Bye bye.